All right.
Hi guys, so thanks a lot for coming. So obviously a nice little intimate meeting here.
It is.
So we've already met. My name is Thorne. I'm below Mortgage Specialist TD. This is Danny. He's a small business account manager at TD. So obviously today, also want to thank, I'm not here, but Paul and Polly helped set this up.
Yeah.
I know Polly was here, but she had to leave. So we do appreciate this opportunity. So I think you said you want to get into investment properties and you want to learn more about them, right? So hopefully today we're going to give you some information that basically what TD's policies are kind of like, what we're trying to look for, some problems that we encounter, and typical solutions that we usually bring up to in order to help our clients. So hopefully at the end of the day you'll lose some more knowledge and obviously be able to add some extra value to your clients. Also, you guys already met with Seem and Andy. They've been at the bank for a long time, a lot of experience. So they're good people for networking, but also when it comes to any Q&A, if we don't have the answer, they might know the answer. And because it's also a nice intimate meeting, if you have any questions, raise your hand or just let us know. You don't need to raise your hand obviously in this scenario. Also, we might use some bank jargon or lingo. Bankers kind of get used to that, so if I do that and you don't know what it means, just say so. All right. Perfect. So kind of what we're going to go over is, I'm going to go over first of all our residential properties. I'll do a little rental analysis, kind of what we look at, kind of examples, just so you can see how, from the background, what we're looking at. I'll briefly talk about hotel condos and live-work condos. I know it's a very rare thing, and a lot of agents have problems getting funding from their clients, etc. So I'll touch base on that a little bit. I'm also going to touch base on residential properties under a business or a holding company. Then Danny's going to take over. He's going to talk about business properties that are like mixed use, so mixed use residential, commercial, and also commercial. We'll talk about owner-occupied properties. Also, new businesses that qualify under what's called a Canadian Small Business Financing Loan. And then also talk about multi-unit residential a little bit, which is what you're looking at there. So first one is rental properties. So I specifically say two or more. And the reason why I say two or more is anytime a client is going to go for the first rental property or they only have one rental property, banks are only going to consider half the income that property is bringing in. So if they're renting a property for say $2,000 a month, the bank will only use $1,000 a month, right? That's a huge disadvantage for the client because half the income's gone, right? Now, that's going to be for all banks. The difference though is that we actually don't consider a lot of those expenses that are going to come with that property, so it kind of outweighs it, right? Now, it might make it better for the client, it might make it worse. So that's why I want to concentrate more on two or more properties. So one is maximum 4 units.
So you're talking if they're buying their property and they don't own any other properties, you own?
If they don't own a single rental property, they're buying their first rental property.
Okay,
Yeah.
the first rental property, but they can own other properties.
Yeah, so right now I'll be talking about 2 or more rentals.
Okay.
Because 1 or less, it's use half the income, that's pretty much it.
Why do you do that? Because it's their first time at it, you're afraid they're gonna mess it up, so it makes them more conservative.
And there's no track record of them owning other properties, and then things can go sour, they're not prepared, they don't have a reserve fund, you know, because things always, as a landlord, if you're the landlord, something goes wrong, you have to pay for it, you know, you can't tell them there's no heat or, you know, for a period of time. So that's why if they have 2 or more, then you've already established, you know, what can go wrong, what can happen, track record, and the bank likes lending to people who have 2 or more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you buy 2 at the same time?
You can. It can be hard. You know, it really depends on what your income is like, etc. Yeah.
So you're talking units, right? Not properties.
Yeah.
Properties.
Yeah. Before is properties, but this year will be units per property.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, well, everyone. Good. Just came in at perfect timing.
Perfect.
Oh, here's the words you just have. So here. This is a printout, just kind of what we're going over, so you can add extra notes to it. Obviously, my card, or Danny's card as well. There you go. So we're pretty much on the second slide, so we're going to start talking about rental properties, 2 or more rentals. So maximum 4 units. Like I said, it's 5 or more, then you're going to be multi-unit residential, which is really Danny's area of expertise. No more than 20% of it can be designated for business use. So if they run could be a salon or something out of their house, that's fine, as long as it doesn't take more than 20% of the property, right? So more like an accountant and something like that. We have a 1.2 debt servicing coverage ratio, or DSC. So basically what that means is, for every dollar of expenses for that property, they want to see $1.20 of income. So this actually might seem really high right now, and it was actually just changed a few weeks ago. So before it used to be 1-to-1, for every dollar of income coming in, no more than one going out, right? So obviously, the new rules, rent control only go up so much, and the new rules
So you're making it more conservative because the government is making it so difficult to make any money in this?
Well, pretty much that. It's coming, being a landlord is kind of riskier and more expensive with the new rules, but also the new,
Lease
the
agreement?
lease agreements, right? So we just changed this a few weeks ago, so like the banks know about this, right? So now, it's not like a hard sell or stop. I get actually exceptions on these all the time. It just depends on the situation, right? Now, we generally want to lend no more than 75% of the value of the property. Now, if it's a brand new property to purchase, we'll go up to 80%. So it was also like a good credit score. But if it's refinances, they just changed it now, so it's no more than 75%. Another thing too is obviously when you purchase like your first home, like it's like your principal residence, you always get a gifted down payment from your parents or relatives, right? They don't want you having, they won't accept gifted payments or down payments for rental property. However, I have some exceptions on that. So it's going to come down to a situation of how much skin does the client have in the game. So I did one like a few months ago. The client, his down payment was $300,000, and he was putting $200,000. His parents were putting $100,000. So overall, they were willing to make an exception because he actually had skin in the game, and the gifted down payment the parents were putting in wasn't a whole lot. So that's an exception like they might consider making, right? So when we do our rental analysis,
Sorry, back up. Where it says 80% weekend.
Yep.
What is that?
So what I mean by that is, we typically have to do 75% lending on a rental property.
Yeah.
We'll do up to 80% if their beacon score, so their credit score is
Oh, their credit
730
score.
or above.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we do our rental analysis, 2 or more properties, these are the type of expenses we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at insurance. We're going to use at least minimum $200 per unit. Property taxes, very self-explanatory. Condo fees, maintenance, that's like ongoing maintenance and repairs. We're going to use at least $1,200 a month $200 per unit per year. We assume a vacancy of 4%, so it means we're taking off 4% of your income right away. Utilities, depending if it's paid by the landlord or not. Obviously, principal and interest payments. And obviously, the new rules for B20, if they're refinancing a property, a rental property, it's not just the principal and interest payments, it's the principal and interest payments plus, an extra 2% on top of that, whichever is greater, the Bank of Canada rate 5.14%, right? So it makes it even harder to buy or refinance those properties. Other fees or expenses we might add on there could be property management fees or like commissions. For example, if you're constantly getting a real estate agent to lease out their property every year, we're really looking at like what's the ongoing fees. If it's one-time expenses, we're not concerned about that.
So just about the refinancing, is that when you're borrowing more money against it, or when you're just, continuing on with an existing thing after a certain term?
So refinancing really applies to if it's going from one bank to another, or you're getting more money, right?
Okay.
So like you might have like a mortgage for $200,000 RBC. If you're going to take it over and make it TD, even though you're not asking for money, it's still considered a refinance, right?
Right.
But then if you're asking for more money at TD or RBC, it's still considered a refinance.
I was just wondering if people are going to be sort of in trouble when they come for mortgage refinancing now. Just for extending. Obviously they can stay with the same lender.
No, it's happening.
It'd be harder for them to move now.
That's one thing I'm going to touch on because, if it's renewal, you're already approved, right? That's going to happen. But if you're refinancing, the entire mortgage is based upon the new rules.
Right.
So that's something I'm going to touch base a little bit later on too. Is like if they're going to refinance, maybe don't refinance the whole mortgage. Maybe just do a second position from like a line of credit, right? Because it makes the entire thing more expensive.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So typical information documents we're looking for is complete T1 general tax returns. This is if someone has owned rental properties for a year or more. If they haven't owned any rental properties, we're not asking for that information. The reason why we're asking for T1 generals is we want to take a look at the statement of real estate rentals, which is really going to show us a breakdown of Like, one, are they claiming that rental income? If they're not claiming it, we can't use it, right? But also, it's gonna give us more breakdown of what those actual costs are and show us a trend. Hopefully they have 2 years history. If not, we gotta look based on 1 year. We're asking for lease agreements. Obviously, it's brand new. If it's a lease, it's like even 5 or 6 years old. We still want a copy of it, but we're also gonna be looking at, do you have rental deposits coming in? So like 3 months rent history. Just make sure it's ongoing. This one, the next one is sign rents. We only ever deal with this if the client's buying a property, it's currently rented out, and they want to keep that tenant. So they'll assign the rent to the new landlord, right? And then market rent, we use this on rare occasion when, let's say you want to buy a rental property, it's not yet rented, but you need that income in order to qualify for it, right? So we can use market rent, which basically an appraiser will go in there. The only downside of market rents is the banks require a higher down payment, at least 35%. But also the market rents, usually it's what the lowest the appraiser thinks that unit can go for. So you might go to rent it for $2,500, but the appraiser's like, okay, the lowest can take is maybe $2,000. So it's a huge difference in income that you might go to use to qualify, right?
Well, you just send one appraiser in to do that?
One appraiser. And so when the appraiser goes to do the actual appraising of the property value, we specifically tell them you need to do a market rent analysis as well.
And could we provide that appraisal to you, or would you send somebody?
No, we have to use our own independent third party. Yeah, we use Nationwide Appraisal Services, I've never heard of them. But they basically administer all the appraisal, but they have to deal with a bunch of different companies.
Okay.
Yeah. Nope, not way. So just an idea, like this is basically kind of the one sheet we look at T1 General. So some of you guys probably seen this before. So this is an actual copy, there's no personal information on there. So just an idea, like obviously some of the things we're looking at here is insurance. Like in this case, I don't know if it's big enough, but like this person pays $983. That's a lot more than the minimum you use, right? So I have to go by the larger amount. Now, for example, this person has like $15,000 in maintenance and repairs. That's like insane amount of maintenance and repairs. But when I see those things, I have to ask questions. Like, is it an ongoing expense or what happened? In this case, like they were stuccoing like their entire place and doing some like putting like a new furnace in, right? That's fine, that makes sense. As long as it's reasonable, then I kind of subtract what it kind of costs and we use that for maintenance and repairs. However though, if they see 2 years of that, underwriters are going to start assuming it's costing $15,000 a year. That's going to really hurt your ratios unless there's something we can really show to prove that all the repairs are done, right? Another issue like in this example is obviously a lot of people don't want to pay taxes, right? So they're trying to put as much expenses on there as possible. So like, they're claiming a loss here. That's fine, but it also makes our job really hard to get you approved because for us, it looks like you're not making any money is what it looks like. So there's always, clients have to weigh that, like how much I want to pay Uncle Sam, and how much I want to be approved for. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So that's just specific breakdown to actually like a property itself.
This is someone's T1 real estate rental on one property from last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what happens if there's multiple properties? Are you seeing an aggregate of everything then?
So I'm actually going to get to that very soon, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's going to be actually next thing after this. So these are just typical problems and solutions I run into. Obviously, one is debt servicing is below 1.2. 95% of the time, it happens. Most properties don't self-service. So the question is, how do you get those people still approved? So we need to mitigate that risk. So we're looking at high personal income compared to debt. So when you remove the income coming in versus the debt in those properties, what's their income compared to their debt? If it's like very high income and low debt, then I can just add that deficit onto this side, and then if it makes sense, they'll prove it, right? Or they have, yep.
Sorry to interrupt. In the case where you're a sales-based position and you're not earning a regular income,
Yeah.
how would you track personal income? Do you look at like?
So you mean like a commission based?
Yeah.
So there's different ways to do it. So when you're commission based or self-employed or what we call like fluctuating income,
Right.
you want to look at your last 2 years' notice of assessments,
Correct.
which gives an idea of kind of consistency, right? And then usually you want to pay so to make sure you're still employed. So we're kind of looking at the average of it, right?
Right.
I wouldn't say it's complete average because if you swing by a huge amount from 1 year to the next, it's like, okay, maybe that's just like a random good lucky year, so we'll go by the lower year, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
But also, if there's a reasonable explanation as to the swing, so let's say you're a real estate agent, you know, 2015, 16, you know, you were well over 200, and then all of a sudden it's 50, then it goes back up to 200. At 50, we can admit if there's a valid reason, like, you know,
Took a family
you
issue,
took a
you
family
didn't work
issue,
for-
you didn't
yeah.
work, you took a, you know, extended vacation,
Yeah.
like, for 6 months, and you decided, you know, this is what I want to do. So as long as there's a story to back it, and it
Right.
makes sense, you
Yeah.
know, that's what.
But 2 years is generally what you'll do, just like in a position like mine, I mean,
Yeah,
almost no income history, right? And especially once you get into the business, it's gonna be about 2 years where you'll start to feel confident.
2 years notice of assessment is usually, because but if you go from like salary to commission, then they'll at least need a minimum of 1 year to see, okay, because no one would just leave a salary job if you think you're gonna make less than a commission.
yeah,
So that's why, so they'll look at least, okay, are you making enough money in your new role after a year? But if it's, you just left the job and you became commission-based, then they wouldn't.
So you're looking, you look at it logically, you just have these roles in place
Yeah,
as a backup.
correct, yeah.
but the numbers still have to make sense.
Yes.
Buy while you're still under salary.
I don't think anybody would give me money right now.
Because once you're approved, you're approved.
And what I will add into there, because I know when you and I had a meeting about kind of like, it's always difficult sometimes like for real estate agents to get approved because of your income. We also do work with alternative lenders. So basically, we can't do the deal, they're vetted by TD, and I do know one broker, they'll actually look at the gross commissions of real estate agents to qualify them for mortgages, right? Now, you probably won't pay like the bank interest rate, you probably pay a little bit higher as in fees, but they actually look at gross commissions. Yeah. So I'll say another one, this comes up once in a while, so there's just a large increase from rent year over year. As in, maybe last year they were charging $1,000 for rent, then they got a new tenant, now it goes to $1,500 or $2,000. It makes sense that rent's gonna go up bit by bit. When you have a huge jump, underwriters will start asking questions. So usually, and it's usually like, okay, maybe you put in some renovations to the property, so now you can actually charge a lot more rent. As long as they can see that, or the appraiser goes in, that makes perfect sense, right? Another issue, though, is some clients, they take cash deposits or they take rent through cash. It's not a good thing to do. Obviously, if you're trying not to, pay the government any taxes, that's one thing. The problem with cash is that when we look at the bank history, we want to see, like maybe $1,000 every month, right,
Yeah.
going through. But if it's a check, I can pull up a check copy. That's easy. But if it's cash, we actually have no idea if you're just going to another bank machine or someone's giving you cash and you're just putting it in there to make it look like it, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have cash deposits. Now, I had this scenario happen about 3 months ago where we were doing a refinance for a client. One unit was paying the client cash, so we couldn't use that income, which means I can only lend her a little bit less money. So our solution was tell your tenant, open up a checking account, get checks. After 3 months, we'll revisit it, and then it just happened last week. We refunded it because okay, now we can see that going in there. We can actually account for that income, right? And the other one, which I want to talk about before, is that it's just not rented yet. We're just using market rent. And then the other one too is obviously B20, the new rules of that. It's harder and more expensive.
What is B20?
So B20 is the new guidelines that came out January 1st,
Oh, okay.
when there's stress
The
test.
stress test, okay.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know it was called.
Yeah, it's the bank terminology or the actual legislation. But what I was saying before is, if you're gonna refinance a property, you may not refinance the existing mortgage, you may just do a second position line of credit, because if we have to finance the whole thing, you gotta pay that, we have to account for that higher payment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just kind of want to give you like 2 examples of kind of like, this is kind of what we, our spreadsheet, right? So a little bit hard for you to see, I know it's kind of small there. But for example, what do you call it? Huh? No, it's not a handout, because that's internal. So you know the T1 I was just showing you a few slides ago? That T1 actually applies to one of these properties. So we'll go through it, we add those property details, and it's really just putting in income less all the expenses, very standard. So at the bottom you see it's red, right? The DSC,
So good.
it says 0.65. That's a lot lower than 1.2, right? Significantly lower. But this is a deal I actually got approved, and it's just plain and simple. They had the income on their own to supplement that difference, right? Now, on another slide, this one here, this client has 10 properties. He's green at the very bottom. Now, you notice some of these are red, some of them are white. we don't require every property to be in the money. We care about the overall, like the aggregate amount of all of them. That's what we care about. Does that make sense? Any questions there? Okay. So this is another one here. So let's say you're gonna buy a rental property, whether it's your first rental property or second or third. You don't own a principal residence, you're gonna be subject to a net worth test. What that means is, after you put down your down payment, you still have to have at least 10% of the value of that property as cash. So if you buy a property for $370,000, after your down payment, after all your closing costs, we still want to see you have at least $37,000 available for yourself. And that's obviously
Cash or liquid assets?
Yeah, liquid assets, cash, yeah. And that's always for any upkeep and it goes wrong, right? Yeah.
Sorry, just as a side note.
Yep.
If you were looking at a property, your first primary residence,
Yep.
and you had no history of property ownership, and you were looking at a property with a legal income suite, as like a basement, for example, how would, from the bank's perspective, mortgaging that property, would it be the same as mortgaging just any regular property, or would you benefit from having that income unit?
So like you're saying like you go buy a property, you're gonna live there, but you also have a rental unit at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
That's actually more favorable for you, because you can actually go through a CMHC as well, right? You don't need a 20 or 25% down payment. You need a less down payment, and you can also, we can use that rental income to help qualify you, right? Yeah, it's just that when it's not owner occupied, that's when they're more stringent, you need a larger down payment,
All right.
yeah.
So if you did that, you bought your first place and it had a basement apartment, and then you go to buy an investment property, can that first property count as your original investment property?
So what you guys we can do, technically, let's say you go buy your first property, right?
Mhm.
You can then say, you know what, I'm gonna buy a new principal residence, and then put less money down on it, and then you just turn this one into your income property, right? So you can do that over and over.
That's what you
Now,
got, yeah.
the bank the underwriters eventually will catch on to that if you keep doing it and doing it. Other issue too though is CMHC will only ever insure one property at once. However, do you guys know what Genworth is?
Mhm.
So Genworth can actually go to 4 properties
Oh, okay.
like that, so you can do that. And what I have seen people do is, you know, they live in this property, they say they're gonna live in this property, they buy it, they don't actually move into it, and they start renting it out right away. You can do it, but same thing, you keep doing it over and over, and underwriters will catch on. But yeah.
So you can have, sorry, just with the Genworth, you can actually have multiple properties with less than 20% down? Just,
They will finance up to 4 properties with less than 20% down.
wow.
Yeah, providing you can obviously afford it, right?
Yeah.
The CMHC is
Yeah.
one only.
Wouldn't you run into problems though, because with the insurance premium, if you were then turning that into your investment property, and you've got this insurance premium on it because of the financing you've got, you're gonna have a hard time making it cash flow.
Well, that's the thing, you are gonna have a harder time,
Yeah.
right? But then, who knows, maybe you find a really good property and you can charge a lot of rent for it, right? It depends, like I see that more often in people who have properties that are non-Toronto.
Yeah,
When they're like student centers, they just make hand over foot.
yeah, yeah.
There's also people that have tons of like make tons of money and have no down payment.
Yep.
You know, so like they have tons of credit, but they just don't have the down payment to.
Like doctors.
Yeah.
Like they first come out, like they just finished residence, I'm making $300,000 a year, but they have like no savings yet, but they wanna buy it right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I just want to touch briefly on hotel condos. Have you guys ever dealt with those?
I don't think I ever have.
Okay.
Oh, like in
Like Four
Shangri-La.
Seasons or.
Shangri-La, yeah.
One King West, would that be considered?
King West is, I think it is a hotel condo, yeah. Actually, no, it is, because I had one person one a few weeks ago.
The same Regis too, or the old Trump Tower.
Yeah.
The old Trump Tower.
Yeah. So these properties like that are super nice and expensive. However, they're considered a restricted property at every bank. What that basically means is it means the bank either doesn't want to touch it or will only do it on an exception basis. So these properties, like T will do them on an exception basis. We preferably want a strong TD client relationship in existence already. Now, some restriction on these, higher down payments. They want 35% down payment. And so there's actually, this is one of those few exceptions, there's no exception to it. However, I have come across this situation, we've made an exception.
Is this only for an investment property? Or
So this is a
personal residence?
hotel condo in general. So
So if you're buying it to live in it,
No, whether you're trying to live in it or rent it out.
Really, why?
Yeah. So the reason why is there's cost sharing arrangements that the bank might not know or can change over a long period of time, which also reduces the marketability of these properties. Right. So, but yeah, I want to get back to like the 35% down payment, or we'll land at most 65%. It's a hard no exception, but I have walked into a situation where, do you guys know the Bisha Hotel?
Yeah.
So the Bisha Hotel, it's actually, the residence and the hotel is actually a separate freehold from each other. And the lawyers were able to provide us documents to state that, and that was a situation where owners made an exception.
Well, that's not really.
Which means we actually went to 80% for the client. Yeah, but it's really gonna depend upon like that separate freehold. So another thing too is, I find brokers cannot handle these, they can't do them. So brokers, you know how like they usually work for several lenders? So a broker, they might work for TD or RBC, even though TD can do the deal, they will not let the broker do the deal. It has to go through someone like me at the bank. Yeah, why they do it, I don't know.
So why aren't all the condo hotels done where the condo is a separate freehold?
I don't think I can think of it, it's just some of the way the structure evolved over time, or they did it one way, then they learned and made mistakes. But yeah, not all like that. So Holly also wanted me to touch base a little bit on live work. I've only dealt with this once in my career. I don't think you guys ever have. They're actually very, very rare. They're actually rare up to the point we actually don't have any specific policy on them. They're literally done on a case-by-case basis. So obviously to live the work, it's usually like, probably a lot of artists live in those places, or like photographers, maybe IT people. The one thing with these properties is we can't determine if we can lend on it until the appraiser goes in. So it's really when the appraiser goes in, they're going to determine, please don't tell me the battery just died. Sorry, one second here. Thanks.
There's a plug right on it.
No, I forgot to plug it in.
There's one right on the other side.
Yeah. on the other side, for sure.
Well, do we have any live work buildings? Or that's just like a mixed use, like,
Yeah, they're
work and farm?
I've seen a couple, there's one on the, like near the Flatiron building kind of thing downtown, it's a live work sort of scenario.
What
It's
would, like-
basically like an open space with like a kitchen,
good.
and I guess it's registered as business use, so. that
That'd be
you can-
exactly it.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
like,
kinda,
There are a few in the neighborhood, but they're all rentals. And you have to be self-employed to actually be able to live in them. There are some at Lawrence Imington.
yeah, that's what I was saying, like they're all warehouse spaces.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's sort of brick kind of,
It looks industrial-ish,
yeah, usually.
usually, and it's got like a kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom.
I think there's one that was built by like Brad Lamb or something, that I got the email, it was called like work lofts. Right, and basically it was like that, and there were like these little 500, 600 square feet open spaces with just a little kitchenette built in and kind of a bathroom, and to sort of make it what you want kind of thing when you go in there.
Yeah, it really depends on how that property is zoned. If it's zoned residential, then it's potential for Adam to do it. If it's zoned commercial, then there's potential for me to do it. It really depends on how it's built and how it's structured, and how it's registered with.
Really depends on that appraiser too, right? So like if it's a brand new property, it's probably gonna be considered residential because no one's had a chance to live in it yet, right, and do anything. But if it's a resale or a refinance, that person could have completely converted, so it's all business. And the appraiser goes in there, and they're like, no, this is more than 20% business. That means it's gonna be in Danny's department. So we just can't determine that until the appraiser goes in. And then, so, yeah, most 20% business, I know the 23, 24% for business on rare occasions by floor space. So the last thing I want to talk about is residential rentals under a holding company. So obviously when you buy a rental, you probably just do it under your own name. You start buying many of them, it makes a tax advantage to put it into business, right? So this is actually where me and Danny's space crosses over a little bit. So a lot of people might have issues because when they see this, they go to the bank like, well, I don't want to pay business interest rates, right? However, I can actually do these under personal interest rates within certain qualifications. So one, it has to be a holding company. And by that means it holds assets. It is not an operating company, it does not sell goods or services, right? So how do we determine that? If it's a brand new company, pretty much what the client tells us. Pretty easy there. If it's an existing company, we're gonna be looking at the financial statements, and we're gonna be looking at what types of expenses are there. So if we see like salary on there, or cost of goods sold, underwriter is gonna classify it as a business, and then it goes over to Danny. If it's not, then it's under personal lending. I have generally found brokers cannot do these as well. I've had calls from some brokers or clients that come to me, it's like, my broker can't do this. So that's another area where we excel. It will be the personal mortgage rates. So same rate you get is under your personal name. Now, we'll only do mortgages only. They don't do home equity lines of credit on these. We'll also do personal guarantees for all owners. We're essentially doing an application with all your personal income and all your debts, but you just sign a guarantee, is it, basically. We'll ask for borrow bylaws. Most companies probably actually don't have bylaws in their articles of incorporation because the lawyer probably does it. But we actually have our own like internal sheet that's like 1 page long. We can just do it for them unless they want to go through the lawyer, but go through the lawyer is going to cost them more money to do that, right? Now, pre-approvals are not available on these, which is kind of a disadvantage. However, I have no problem taking all the information and documents from our client and doing my own analysis to give a reasonability of what to expect. Yep.
When you say borrower bylaws, so you provide the bylaws that you want adopted by the corporation to sit in the books? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes and no. So like some corporations will have their bylaws made by usually the lawyer at time of incorporation, right?
Yeah.
Later on. If they have it, we just want to see it. We basically just want to see that the corporation is allowed to borrow money and there's no restrictions.
Okay.
That's what we want to see. If not though, we have our own 1 page template, they sign it, we send it off. And clients will actually sometimes even just keep that and put their own minute book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this would be like a helpful thing for us, say you have like 3 or 4 clients that wanna team up to buy an investment property.
Yep.
And they form a corporation in order to buy it.
Yep, that's
They
possible,
can
yeah.
go to you, they can kind of get their approval based on the 3 individual people, get kind of a ballpark figure of what they could afford together.
Yep.
And then purchase this property and potentially still qualify for the residential rates.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if it is considered like, yeah, if it is considered an operating company or let's say it's an existing business
Yeah.
and it is operating, then it would have to go under Danny's name, right?
Well, generally this would be like, you know, a situation though where say
Like a
you've
venture
got 3
capital.
friends that wanna actually team up just to purchase a property, so you'd be forming the corporation for the
Yeah.
purpose of just purchasing that property, right?
So the bank's gonna distinguish the differences between whether it should be housed under personal or if it should be housed under business, depending on whether or not you're gonna be actively doing this as a business, right? So if you're doing this under a holding company and this is your business, and this is how you're gonna make money, then it's gonna be housed under business banking, because it is technically a holding company that is operating as a business. If you are buying it as a one-off under a personal holding company, and you're doing maybe 1 or 2 of them under a holding company, and then you're just looking to buy and hold and rent, then they would be housed under personal banking, okay?
So would you look at income?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
and
So if you're buying properties, rental properties as your business, okay? So you don't have a full-time job, or you make some income on the side, but your primary income is gonna be sourced from these rental properties, and you're buying and selling these rental properties for the long term, it's gonna be a business. You're technically considered an operating business, right?
Okay.
You're no longer a personal holding company.
But if you're, I think what Paul was trying to say, if you have 3 doctors that want
Sure.
to get together and buy
Yeah.
a property and they create a holding company to buy and hold the property in.
Yes, that's gonna be housed under Adam, because they're buying that one property.
Or 2 or 3.
Or 2 or
as a
3.
whole.
They're not doing it as
A
their
business.
primary source of
Yeah, it's an
income,
investment,
as a business.
if they put their jobs as doctors.
Part of
instead
the-
yeah, then it changes. yeah.
There's 2 advantages for them to form a corporation. One is obviously the taxation, but also just it makes the structure easier for partnering 2 people together, like as opposed to it's just joint tenants sort of thing. You could actually have that and then one person could technically sell their shares out or something like that. if they need
You can
to
sell your
it.
shares out, you can take dividends, rather than, you know, that income every year. Right? So you can hold out on income, you can income split, you can do a lot of different options when it's housed under a corporation.
We also had once an accountant come in and talk about this sort of tricky way to kind of get this set up, but apparently it's supposed to be above board sort of thing, but it was, I think it was the idea of getting everything approved as your personal, and when it actually goes to be registered by the lawyer, you create a bare trust agreement saying that that the corporation is the beneficiary or something like that. And so it actually does end up getting registered under the corporation. But that's, but basically it's.
So bare trusts are a little bit more complicated. The bank generally has a lot of yellow tape around them. I think what the accountant was referring to is generally when you are buying a rental property under a corporation, a lot of lawyers don't necessarily like to set it up that way, because if the corporation backs out of the deal in the last minute and it's a brand new corporation, the corporation doesn't have any assets, so there's nothing that could be recouped if they back out. There's nothing that can be sued, right? So what they'll do is they'll buy it under the personal name, and then when they go see the lawyer,
No assignment clause in it and assign.
they'll switch it to a corporation, right?
Right.
But the bank's all setting it up, in a manner where it's gonna be purchased under the corporation. I'm not as familiar with those bare trusts. They're not common at all. So I'm not really exactly sure. Maybe?
No, I haven't seen that type of person.
They're very, very lucrative. And those are generally for a much higher net worth clients that are buying multi-million-dollar homes, probably, that are looking to avoid estate tax later on in life. That's the only thing that I can think of, buying them under a bare trust. Because bare trust has different estate taxes, and that's probably the reason, the best leverage that you have in doing them. Otherwise, I wouldn't see a reason as to doing them. Does that answer maybe?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, to be honest, I was a little foggy on it myself, sort of just, this was like, I guess, last year or something, so
Sure.
I have to rehash that conversation just to see what the advantage was.
Sure.
But it had to do, part of it had to do with the idea of being able to get things qualified under a personal,
Mhm.
but at the same time, still getting the advantage of eventually having it with a corporation. It had something to do with that, so.
Well, when we go through my presentation, maybe it was one and the same, but it was discussed differently.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of the similarities in what you're saying and what I'm going to be discussing. So hopefully it kind of reminds you of something that was said. If not, then we can maybe take it offline and follow a little later.
So you guys get a copy of the agreement of purchase and sale, and if you see an assignment clause, do you react to that?
Assignment for like, maybe like, kind of like a,
So somebody buying it personally is going to assign it to a corporation after the fact on closing?
oh, yeah. Like, I haven't seen that yet, but yeah, we will. We need a firm purchase and sale agreement, right?
It can be firm, but if you put an assignment clause in there, it allows you to assign it to whoever you want at any point in time prior to closing. So,
But then once he does the assignment, we need that again, so we reapprove it. So we'll
Yeah.
approve it based on the name, and if there's an assignment clause and they're assigning it to somebody else, as soon as that, it will null and void this approval, and we'll do it again.
okay, that's what, yeah, because it would come after the deal is firm prior to closing,
prior
it
to
becomes an
closing.
amendment.
Yes, an amendment to the
And
purchase and
then-
sale agreement. So we would need to be made aware of it, because if we weren't aware of it and went to the lawyer would not fund the deal, because we were approving it under the old condition.
Right.
So the name of the borrower needs to match.
Yeah.
The name on the, yeah.
Purchase, right? If we, so an example, in scenarios that I've seen, people would buy it, there would be a clause that it's gonna be purchased from the corporation. I would get my underwriter to acknowledge that, and then we would, behind the scenes, instruct the solicitor to ensure that it's purchased in the name of the corporation.
Right, because sometimes sellers are hesitant to sell to a corporation, but they'll sell it to a person, and if the agent doesn't see the assignment clause or they don't balk at it, then sometimes that's a way of getting around.
I usually come into contact that a lot when it's like a pre-construction, so like they'll buy it in the personal name, and then when it comes
That's
closer, it's like,
flipping
I want to put
investment.
it in my business name. I never had an issue with that, we just make sure, it's like, okay, just make sure we get an updated agreement, right? But, yeah, that's usually for pre-construction, no?
Either we get an updated agreement, or we're financing in the new
New, and,
person's
yeah,
or entity's name. And then we, behind the scene, as a bank, will instruct the lawyer to ensure that it's purchased under that company.
Right.
Or that name.
That's pretty much under mine, so I just want to say exceptions can always be considered, so I know we have a lot of rules. I'd say 95% of my deals have an exception in it, and probably 90% of our rules, exceptions can be made. So it really just depends what's the strength of the application, what rationale we have to mitigate that risk. And then let's hand over to Danny. This is the arrows.
Okay, so the first topic that I'm going to discuss, it kind of overlapped with our last discussion in regards to buying properties under a holding company. Again, we kind of addressed this slightly with respect to if you're doing it as a business, if you're buying these properties in order to generate revenue, and this is where you're going to make money as an operating company, then I would definitely come in and help you with the deal if it was those one-offs where you're buying it just to own a residential property housed under a holding company, then it would be housed under that. Okay, we're looking property is going to be zoned as residential. Okay, 25 years. On rare exceptions, we do 30. They are very rare, but they can go to 30. They're really looking for a reason why to go to 30. If it's going to make the deal, then they're not going to do it. Okay, so there has to be a legitimate reason. If it's just the only way they're going to get approved, we'll probably avoid it due to risk. Okay, 75, we do up to 75% loan to value. That's also subject to sliding scale. So Adam hasn't touched up on sliding scale yet. So the bank will lend a certain amount of money based on the property value. And then once it peaks that value, we decrease our loan to value in addition to that. So I think sliding scale is 1.25?
Yeah.
1.25 million, yeah.
Right, so we'll lend 75% of the first 1.25 million, okay? And then we will lend 50% on the remaining property value. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. The maximum lending we do on these type properties is 1.25 million. Okay, 4 units or less. Okay, once it goes over 4 units.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
You'll loan what, up to?
Up to a maximum of 1.25 million.
How do you buy an investment property in Toronto then?
I mean, we have different avenues. So under small business banking channel, up to 1.25 million is essentially the highest that we go. We have, I have never been placed with a situation where we do rental property with a mortgage amount under small business banking.
We have, yeah, we've done it with professionals. We've gone probably around the $2 million range, because you're right. the
Yeah,
property
the
prices are
property
low.
prices wouldn't.
But it would be on an exception basis, but not extremely difficult to get.
Like when I was in the role,
Yeah.
we did a few that were over 1.25 million, right?
This is under small
Yeah.
business,
Okay.
so personal has their own program.
Under
So if you're buying under
Okay.
for yourself to invest, and he's specifically referring to small business.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it's under Adam, he can go above the purchase price of 1.2 million.
Right.
So
So
this
is
is
that
because
purchase
even-
price or 1.25?
No, lending amount, lending amount.
Lending.
Lending,
Oh, okay,
lending,
lending.
lending.
Okay, this is the most we would lend.
It's even, like a,
Like in the beaches, for example, it's 2.5 million.
it's same over here for like
So,
3 units
for
or
3 units
4
and
units in
things
a,
like
in
that.
a big
So
old
you
house.
could still buy it, but it's subject to a sliding scale formula. So it's
Above
under
1.25
small business is
2%.
75%, but we go to 80% on the under Adam.
Okay, so again, there are exceptions to every rule, okay? The bank likes to paint everything with the same brush and then kind of get to the nitty-gritty of making exceptions here and there. So the debt servicing, we did go through this prior. For every $1 in total income that you're paying, you should be generating $1.25 in income, okay? We take a look at various sources of income. We will take the average of 60% of your notice of assessment, so you as a personal guarantor. We'll take 50% of the rental income as well. In addition to that, if the holding company is an existing holding company and they have other rental properties, we'll take the bottom, the actual income of that rental, of that corporation as well. Okay? If there is an operating company, so if the applicant is self-employed and they own a business and they, their personal income is very low, they're starting a new holding company to buy assets, and they have a business that makes a lot of money, they can guarantee the purchase of this property and use that income, that side business where their livelihood is being made, use that income to service this debt. Okay? So essentially what we look for, businesses looking to purchase real estate property. Okay? Businesses with high income that are looking to purchase real estate, rental properties. Foreign investors, okay, that are looking to buy through a corporation. And this is another unique one. So when you buy and borrow under a corporation, the debt belongs to the corporation and not to the individual. Okay. So a very a simple way of remembering that is when applying for credit, when it's personal, it's just personal. So they're just going to look at your personal assets, liabilities, and debt. When applying under business, we're going to look at your personal and your business. So you have to kind of debt service all together, okay? The advantages of opening up multiple corporations is that when you borrow under one corporation, your debt is just on that corporation and individually, personally. Question?
Just to that point, if you, as an individual, have two businesses, and say you're doing one for residential and one for commercial properties, but you've guaranteed both businesses,
Right.
will you as a bank see that we're only going to be talking about doing business for residential, but you'll see that I've guaranteed the commercial business as well?
Right.
So I am liable for that if anything were to happen, so you would look at that, even though the debt is exclusively.
So are they two separate corporations?
Two separate corporations, but I've guaranteed both.
Right, so we would look into that, but based on our current policy, it would not negatively impact. Okay, so, this is a unique way of setting up multiple corporations and borrowing under multiple corporations. And each corporation is liable for that debt, okay? You as an individual, you're co-signing, you're guaranteeing.
So, yeah, you have to put a personal guarantee
Yes,
on
you
all
have
of them
to, you have to
anyway.
personal guarantee all of them, and you can use your income to service it. But if you have $1 million worth of debt under Corporation A, and you set up another corporation, Corporation B, and you're looking to borrow under Corporation B, the debt that is owed under Corporation A doesn't factor into the debt servicing of B.
Right.
Okay, make sense? Okay, so this is business investment properties and commercial properties. So these are going to be the properties all along Dundas, all along the major streets, where the landlord, where it's owned and then it's tenanted. So people are paying rent. Okay, so if you do any commercial real estate or commercial sales, this would be housed under small business banking. The property is going to be zoned as commercial or mixed use. Okay, if it's mixed use or commercial, it still falls under the commercial lending guidelines. Okay, we can do up to 20-year amortization. Major urban, we do 70% loan to value.
Why can't you do 25?
Generally they're harder to sell, so the resale value on them is harder. So we're a little bit more conservative when it comes to lending. That's solely the reason why loan to value is a little bit lower.
Yes, usable life too, isn't it?
Yeah, we also take a look at usable life of the property. That's generally in the appraisal. So that's going to be in a condition of credit. The usable life of the property needs to be longer than the amortization.
Okay.
If it's not, then we'll reduce the amortization, which may affect your debt servicing. Okay, if it's a special use property, like let's say a church, we will reduce the amortization to 15 years. Okay, because it's harder for the bank to call on that security in the event things went sideways, so we reduce the amortization.
Faith is on its way out in 15 years, that's what you're saying?
The minimum amount.
However, if we're going to church to convert it to a multi-unit residential, then its usable life becomes.
So that gets a little tricky, because the bank really doesn't like when you do structural renovations on a property while you owe a balance on a mortgage. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you were to buy a property and demolish it and then build again, The bank gets very concerned because they have that property as collateral, as security, and they may call on that security.
But yeah, I would assume you would do it with construction financing.
Construction
Because
financing.
this is what you're gonna
Yes,
be
yeah,
doing, yeah.
So
That's
that's
just a
what,
different avenue.
that would be a
So
different-
they just don't
okay.
want you just, without telling
Yeah,
us,
no,
destroy the
because
building and then
That's
there's no
the,
security.
yeah, you're not allowed to do that with a mortgage, yeah.
yes, definitely construction lending.
Finance.
Okay, that's a little different than this type of lending, but it's also available.
So when you buy a house, you can buy a house with a renovation mortgage attached. Can you do the same thing for a multi-unit? Like if you know that you're buying a vacant and you want to redo the bathrooms and the kitchens before you put it on the market to rent out those
Are you
units.
talking about
you get-
structural or non-structural renovations?
well,
No,
it's
which your
just-
bathroom is not structural.
Yeah,
so
you're
Yeah,
gonna-
but
so-
cosmetics.
But what I'm talking about is there an equivalent to a mortgage plus renovations in
In a multi-unit residential,
multi-unit residential?
I haven't come across that. Mandy, have you ever come
Yeah,
across
the
that?
dilemma is that in our business, it's, if you are going to demolish or renovate, that means that's a vacant unit. We very rarely lend on vacant units. So it's almost like a chicken and egg situation, like you need to get the tenants out to renovate,
Yeah.
but we don't lend on vacant units. So let's say you have 4 units and you were doing 1, right? But the other 3 is rented out and it's generating enough income to support the debt that we provide you for on that unit, that'd be fine. But if you were like, you know what, I need to do all the bathrooms, all the kitchens in this 4-unit thing, it would go under, it would likely not go under small business banking, it would probably go under commercial. And at that point, and they will also look at the rentability as well too.
Because I know around here, a lot of the 4-plexes or 6-plexes have been owned by the same owner for like 30 years and they've just been run into the ground. So by the time they go up for sale, they haven't been condemned, but like I'm just thinking one on South Kingsway where there are no tenants in it. You know it was built as a legal multi-unit residential, but whoever buys that has to renovate it before they put tenants in it. And the advantage to that is you're gonna get maximum rent because they're nice brand spanking units. So from an investment point of view, when you're gonna be stuck with rent controls, you wanna start at the highest, you're not inheriting a bunch of low rents that you can't do anything with. So I would think that would be like an
So what we would
advantage.
normally do in a scenario like that is that when we have the information, we have like a full portfolio package of this client. This client usually this will not be his sole property
Yeah,
or his sole asset.
right,
So what we do is we dip into these other assets to put together the financing to do what they need to do. We're not even gonna touch this property, this is not income bearing for us.
right.
We'll let him do what he needs to do, and then at that point, once it's done and he has it leased out, we'll then,
Well, we-
that's right, we'll refinance the
That's it.
building and then
Okay.
repatriate the money back into whatever properties we've delved into to get it from. But these clients are probably rare, they're probably deep pocketed, and they have large personal income. Because when you get into that type of construction, it's multi-units, it's not gonna be $100,000, $200,000, it'll be quite a lot of money. Like,
Yeah,
more money.
yeah.
Especially if buildings are 20, 30 years and have not seen any facelift,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah, because they're selling for about 1.7 to 2 million.
yeah.
And a lot of them, because of the rents in the area, if you upgrade the bathrooms and the kitchens,
Yeah.
you can get, depending whether it's a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, you can get like 2,500, almost 3,000
Per unit.
per unit per month. So it's definitely worth throwing an IKEA kitchen in there
Yeah.
and
Agreed.
a coat of paint.
You just need to be able to have other sources of financing to be able to do that, do what you need to do. And then at that point here, you know, I've got my tenants in place, I'm ready to
So-
lease out.
But so how does that work? Like if you're are you just doing line of credits on the other properties to provide the construction financing?
Yep.
Or, but how do you close the deal? How do
So-
you buy the unit and?
So I think, to answer your question in a more direct way, we wouldn't, in essence, provide you with additional financing when you're buying that multi-unit residential based on that property. You would have to have other sources of either income or other sources of assets. So you generally, people that are buying these properties and renovating them, again, are deep-pocketed and have other sources of assets that they can leverage in order to renovate and bring those properties from what they are to what they would like to be, right?
Okay, so,
Alternatively,
Let's just
I
look-
can give you an alternative solution. So under the residential side, you could do purchase plus improvements.
Yeah, that's what I
So,
mean, can you?
but the thing is, to close the deal, you need the down payment, so
Right.
that would not something so you
Right,
have
so
to
you've
have
got,
that.
you've got the
You
down
close the
payment.
deal, and then you tell the bank, I'm doing a purchase plus improvements, and then the bank will look at it and then fund you according to what the new value is going to be. But it's, again, you still need to have assets, you know, and things that.
Sometimes I think there's like two ways that people do that. One is they either have $5 million already, then they buy this property, they renovate it. Once they renovate it, they now finance the property, renovate it to free their money back up to move to the next project.
Yeah.
Or they go through like a B lender for like a year
Yeah.
at like 8 to 10%
Right, that's
to
what I'm
do all of
thinking.
that sort of stuff. And then
Yeah.
again, once it's financed, then they go back to the bigger banks.
But the issue is if you're buying a fourplex and you're gonna do this, it's vacant, so you can't count any of the rents, because, so you're basically just buying like you
So
were buying a
a
house.
fourplex, again, is not a multi-unit residential, right?
So then you would just,
it's five.
it's just like a house with no income at that point.
Right.
It just happens to have 4 units in it.
Right, okay, so again, once you enter that stage of more than 4 units, it becomes a completely different ballpark, completely different animal, and the approval criteria are completely different,
Right.
okay? But those are very good questions, thank you. Okay, so back to these are for commercial units where the property is actually being leased. So these are rarer than if a commercial purchase, than a commercial unit is being purchased for the business. Okay, so these come up less, and they're becoming less common, but the individuals that do this more often are buying more of them, right? So they tend to buy their 3rd or 4th or 5th commercial unit to rent, okay? So this is what we're generally looking for. So customers that are looking to buy commercial real estate, obviously for rental purposes. So customers looking to purchase investment properties and again, not have that report on their credit bureau, okay? And if they have large cash balances in holding or operating companies looking to buy commercial real estate for rental income.
This is sort of a side question.
Sure.
Do you find, and I've often sort of thought about more residential investment properties because I'm used to doing residential. And to me, on a commercial property, they're more likely to pack up and vacate in the middle of the night than in a residential rental property because all their stuff is there.
Sure.
So do you use a higher vacancy rate in your numbers when you're calculating commercial properties?
No, we use generally a higher debt servicing,
No, okay.
okay, and we use a lower loan to value. So a higher, so our, we tend to
Ask for a bigger down payment.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it's gonna be a higher down payment, a lower loan to value, okay, to mitigate the risks overall there, okay?
So the banks do view the commercial properties as more of a risk than the residential properties?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, yes, yes. Because they're less marketable.
Yeah.
So we have business properties that are owner occupied, so these are gonna be the properties that the owner is occupying the space and is running their business there, okay? These are more favorable to the bank, because they're running their business there. So we know that they're more inclined to stay instead of leaving in the middle of the night. These properties are gonna be zoned as commercial as well. 50% of the above ground surface area needs to be deemed as used by the owner. Okay, so if it's less than 50%, then we're gonna consider it non-owner occupied. Maximum to value is 75%, 4 units or less, and then the debt servicing is gonna be a little less at 125.
So what would be an example of something like that? So I'm thinking if you've got like along Dundas and you've got store plus apartments.
Sure.
That type of thing?
So those are gonna be considered, so if you're running your business there, that's owner occupied, it would fall under these categories. Okay, if you're renting it out, it would be considered a business investment property.
So if you take a store
Yeah.
with apartment and the owner is living in the apartment and running the store,
Yes?
then that's your 50% coverage. But if they were living in the apartment and not using the store themselves, like when you say 50%,
So I've had a deal where I've had that happen, and the reason we got around it is because it was a 50-50, so it was residential above, and it was a back split. So he had a small office in the back, so The upstairs combined with his back split, his back office, was higher than 50% when we did our appraisal, and in that case, we deemed it as owner occupied. Owner occupied rates are more favorable
Right.
than investment properties. Okay, so you do get a better rate because it's less risk for the bank. So we will try as bankers to actually calculate the square footage of the area being used. But yeah, if it's a 3-floor unit, so like this is a commercial space, three floors, and you lived in the 2 floors above, we might be able to convince our credit department that it is over 50% owner occupied, right? We might not, it really depends. It's a case-by-case exception, but I mean, we've made those decisions before favorably for the customer. Okay, the minimum is 50,000, the maximum is $1 million, okay? Once you get over $1 million, we do get our commercial banking team involved, and then they have a different lending criteria as well. Okay, so what we look for here, so businesses that are looking for commercial spaces that for a new business location. So let's say they're operating a location, they're becoming very successful, they don't want to pay rent anymore, they want to buy something and they want to move into it. Existing businesses that are buying the property from the landlord wants to sell it to them. Generally, these are private sales, but real estate agents I have seen get involved from time to time for that purchase agreement and just to ensure that it's being purchased at a fair price. Some existing businesses that are looking for second locations, sometimes franchises that are looking to buy into a second location. Okay, so moving over to the Canadian Small Business Financing Loan. So this is a government guaranteed loan that allows clients to put a smaller down payment down. It must be owner occupied. You can put as a minimum down payment of 10%. There are fees associated with these. The government will charge a 2% guarantee, kind of like CMHC on business side. And the interest rate is going to be prime plus 3%. Okay, these are going to be for your new businesses that are looking to retain a lot of cash. As well as that, they're going to be, if you are a brand new business and you don't have a proven track record, this is the only product that the bank has that allows you to use a business plan with projections instead of actual real income. So you can go in and say what you are expected to make based on a business plan, and we would use that to service your debt. Okay, what we're looking for here, so minimum down payment of 10%. Businesses that have a lot of potential to grow, businesses that have a lot of potential to expand, and businesses that are looking to buy and operate their business out of their location. Okay, moving over to multi-unit residential. These are a little bit more complex. And the application process does take an extended period of time. If you do come across one of these, I would highly recommend getting them in front of either Adam or myself, or in front of the bank as quickly as possible, because these can take 6 to 8 weeks to get approved. But generally, these are minimum 5 units or more. Okay, they must be permanent rental, used for permanent rental.
So you can't get pre-approval on these, so you can't say I'm going out to buy, in my business plan, an 8-unit residential property
But I mean, again,
in this price range.
we would take a look at, we take a look at each individual property, and we factor in less of a personal guarantee, and we really look at the income of that property versus the purchase price, okay? So those are case by case. It would be very, very difficult for us as a bank to give you just a blanket pre-approval and then say, go out and buy a property, right? So these are very specific. What I'm trying to say is they're very specific to the property you're buying based on the profitability of that property, which is why we don't do pre-approvals on these, okay? But again, they do take an extended period of time, so if you do engage in a purchase of one of these, it's recommended to get them over in front of me or in front of someone at the bank as soon as possible.
Put a really long finance condition clause in there.
No.
Well, you would, you'd have to say it's offered conditional for 8 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So
Financing.
it would, for that, in those cases, yes, right? But we would pre-screen you, right? So I mean, if you're looking for a property, you bring me the purchase agreement before you go and buy it. I'm gonna look at the cap rate. So the cap rate, are you familiar with the cap rate? So we use a 6% cap rate as a bank. So in the purchase agreement, sometimes they will tell you what the cap rate they're using to calculate the estimated market value of that property is. If it's lower than 6%, just be cautious because the bank's is gonna consider the property value to be less than what was calculated. If they're using more than 6%, then they're using a very conservative calculation, and the property value would be calculated, our estimated market value would be higher, right? So in this case, so we do insured and uninsured, so conventional and in CMHC approved deals. Maximum for uninsured deals is 75%. We will do 75% of the appraised value, the purchase price, or the economic market value. So that's where we're going to use that 6% cap rate. And the maximum loan to value is 25, on rare exceptions, 30 years. Insured, we do a maximum loan to value, is generally going to be determined by CMHC based on the property. Generally, it's about 85%, and a max of 40-year amortization. So the advantages of going with CMHC is you actually will get a lower rate, okay? And the lower rate can be significant. It can be up to 150 basis points lower than a conventional deal. Okay, the reason why is because it's less risk for the bank because it has a government guarantee. You have a higher loan to value and a longer amortization.
So if you ran that through a spreadsheet, and you take the lower interest rate against the CMHC fee, does it usually balance out to be better to go that route than to go?
We would do the analysis and we would give you that advice to see whether or not it would be better for you to go with a lower rate and paying the CMHC fee, opposed to paying a higher rate
and no fee.
and no fee,
Yeah.
right? So there are advantages to each, right? The disadvantages is you're going to pay a lot more higher fees. So fees range from 1.75 to 4.5%.
Whoa.
Right? So 4.5% can be substantial, right?
Yeah.
But again, it depends on the life of the mortgage. So sometimes it might be advantageous for you to pay that 4.75% up front, but now you have that reduction in that rate for the life of the mortgage might end up saving you a lot more money in the long run, right? So we would help you with that advice.
Could you do like a 10-year fixed term mortgage that's
I believe
that's portable or?
I have it on a cheat sheet. I was just condensing a lot of the
Yeah,
information.
I'm just curious.
Do we do I don't know, I'm not sure if we do a 10-year
Yeah,
term.
I'm not sure what that is one.
I'm not 100% sure. I can get back to you.
Or even the
That's okay.
portability part as well.
It's the portability part, you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to be tied into that, but if you could secure that,
So we have terms.
That's right.
I know we generally have terms 1 to 5 years.
yeah.
But we don't offer open on these. Just the amount of work going into them, we definitely want to make sure that at the end of the day, that we stay profitable.
Yeah.
But I'm inclined to say that we might have a 10-year plan. I'm not 100% sure. I remember reading it somewhere. But generally with the bank, the longer the term, the higher the rate.
Yeah.
Generally, so it might be advantageous to take shorter terms and then renew opposed to going with a 10-year term. But again, it's depending on the market, right?
Yeah.
And then the typical information that we're going to ask for one of these multi-unit residential. So if it's being purchased under a corporation, we're generally going to ask for 3 years financial statements, 2 years depending if they have side-by-side year-over-year comparisons. We're going to look at 2 years tax returns for the individual. We might ask for T1 generals. We're going to look at 3 years historical operation statement for the actual property. And we're going to spend a lot of emphasis on the rent roll. So the rent roll is very, very specific, is very important as well on that property. And then everything else is required, like source of down payment, appraisal, all that fun stuff. Don't really want to get into the nitty gritty, but the majority of it is going to be weighed out on the rent roll, as well as the historical operations of that property. Okay, the pro forma. Usually the pro forma or the historical operation statement is included in the purchase agreement, so as well as the rent roll. So potential purchasers can take a look at and do their own calculations, see if the property is if the estimated or the market value is accurate. All right, and that is pretty much it. Exceptions can always be considered, and again, with small business banking, deals tend to get a lot more complex than on the personal side. So I would recommend the sooner that you can get me involved, the better the customer can be prepared, and the more likely it is that they're going to get approved for financing, opposed to rushing a deal. It tends to be very difficult to get everything finalized and set up in time, because on the business side, there's a little bit more work that's involved, and they're not as clean cut sometimes as personal deals, though personal deals can get very complicated as well.
You guys have any questions?
Maybe ask a lot of questions along the way.
Sure.
Hey guys, just on the personal side, do you do a lot of new construction financing or builder deals?
Not so much, but
If you do, or if you know anyone in your offices, ask them to reach out to Adam. We're the only bank out of the 5 banks that still don't stress test as long as the purchase and sale agreement was signed prior to January 1st of 2018. So if the purchase and sale agreement was signed anytime last year, up to December 29th or 30th or 31st, we'll still qualify them under the old rules.
Yeah,
Cool.
okay.
Yeah. So we're the only bank that does that.
That's good to know.
Just a little plug in for Brad.
When you on a personal level, that's good to know.
Yeah, so anyone who's holding on to like purchases that they've had, the builder delays in closing, anything like that, it's something that the bank does.
I guess anything else you guys have noticed since the start of 2018 in terms of like approvals and stuff like that?
Just people are more cautious now. That's the one, to be honest with you. They're still buying. It's just that there's not a bidding war for everything. There's certain pockets where there's still bidding wars.
Yeah.
But I mean, now there's, the media says the inventory is less and less, but I mean, to be honest with you, there's a lot of inventory.
I never listen to that.
I don't listen to that either, but it's just that you just see it that, they're not rushing into buying. They're like, okay, let me look at this, and then they're like, okay, let me look at the other one too that I've always, before it was like, oh, you found one, just buy it. Like, you don't even think about it kind of thing, but now it's, they want to get approval first. A lot of people are not waiving condition of finance now. They're saying, okay, I have 5 days. They take their 5 days for a condition. Before it's like, yeah, you know what, I've already waived it. When they don't even have an approval. And agents were pushing them to do that as well before, now they don't.
I heard that you can avoid the stress test if you go to a credit union and you avoid the top 5 banks. So are you finding you're losing business to credit unions? Because the prices are still going up. So people, in order to buy, still need to get the same amount. And with the stress test, they've just lost their buying power. So do you find it's affecting your business and people are going
Yeah
elsewhere?
and no, because they give them a higher rate. And so when you get a higher rate on a larger dollar amount, you qualify for less based on your income, because they're still using income to qualify.
It affects anyone that's federally regulated, which means even things with B lenders, right? Yeah, credit unions, they're not federally regulated, right?
Right.
So they're Ontario, so yeah. But yeah, otherwise, I haven't noticed a difference.
Yeah. They usually go to B lenders, and B lenders are also.
Yeah. No, I was thinking more of credit union because I just heard that was a way to avoid
That's
it.
the way to avoid it, but I mean, at the end of the day.
I think it's a good thing to have in place,
I
because our
think
interest
so. I
rates are
think so
going
too.
up, so I think unless we want a bloodbath later, it's
Exactly.
not a bad thing to be doing, but I was just wondering if you're
We
finding
saw
that
it,
people are really still aggressive in circumventing the rules by going elsewhere.
Thank you guys.
Well, thank you guys for coming.
Appreciate your time, guys.
Yeah,
Hope it was informative, hope you learned something.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Any questions or any feedback, just please email me, let us know, we always
Yeah.
want to learn as well.
Also, future sessions, if you have a topic that you want Adam to cover, or Danny, just let us know, and then we can bring on, because we also have investment advisors at the bank. If you've been in real estate for a while, you can, how to, benefit from, investing, things like that. So it's not just about real estate, we can help you develop, we have the whole bank at our disposal.
Yeah.
So anything that you need from TD's perspective, reach out to Adam and, you know, he can arrange it for you.
I don't know if you guys have ever had anyone from CMHC come in, I could arrange that too, because some of their presentations are actually very informative and very interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's
Like
good.
that, so yeah, if you like market updates or analysis of where they're going, or et cetera, yeah.
We
Well, I
used to
actually
have,
heard, just, you know, in our meeting yesterday or whatever, that we are looking for some speakers for sort of May, June.
Okay.
A little
Yeah.
tougher to find some speakers, so if you reach out to Hall again, she's kind of in charge of the education this year, so.
Perfect.
So is it for the office meeting?
For well,
Yeah.
there's for different things that we have going on, like office meetings or other trainings that we have and different things like that. You know, there's some opportunities, I think, because there's a lot of times we'll bring in agents to talk about things like prospecting and stuff, but in those months, a lot of agents are very busy, so they're hesitant to commit to come in to speaking to our office.
Okay, anytime.
but I think before they changed our continuing education credits, we used to have a lot more interesting, sort of series like, you know, having CMHC or Genworth come in and the economic forecast, we used to get credit for it, which made it like a double whammy great thing to do, and now they changed that, so, it's not harder to get agents to come to stuff like that, it's just, it's not as offered as prevalent because we're not still trying to get our continuing
Yeah,
education.
makes sense.
That was a stupid thing to do, because now we just sit there like ding dongs doing online,
Is that Trev or Oria or?
that's Rico.
Rico, okay.
Sorry, I want to look up and you So, but no, they've had some from, I've seen some from CMHC and Genworth, and they're really interesting.
Okay. I just got a contact with Genworth, but I need to test them out first, find out how good the presentation is. Yeah.
Who would, Genworth,
Genworth, I think her name's Courtney, I think it is.
because the girl I used to know there was actually the sister of a client of mine. And I don't know if she's still there, because I haven't spoken to her for a while. Her sister's name is. Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe it was in Genworth. What was the other one? There's CMHC, Genworth, there used to be another one, Capital,
I don't remember a third one.
it's not coming to me.
No, that's okay.
One of those moments.
Perfect.
But no, thank you, that was great.
No problem, thank you for coming.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.